Hi, I'm Judy Farrell and this is the Chai Sessions, my podcast for Merchant City Yoga, where I talk with yoga pals old and new, trying to understand better what it is we're doing when we practice yoga and why we do it. In this edition of the Chai Sessions, I'm talking to Osteopath Gareth McGee. Some of you might know Gareth already from his anatomy and physiology sessions on our yoga teacher training programme here at MCY. And if you're watching on video, you'll see Morticia, our studio skeleton, is also joining me for this episode. Gareth has an honours degree in biochemistry and an MSc in anatomy and physiology. And as if 8 years at university wasn't enough, he returned to studying and came out with yet another honours degree, this time a BSc Honours in Osteopathic Medicine and Osteopathy from the College of Osteopaths. He's the owner of a busy osteopathic practice, Magee Osteopathy, in Perth in Scotland, and I'm delighted he's taken time out of his busy schedule to sit down with me for a chat. I so appreciate Gareth's generosity. Every time we get together, I learn something new or see things from a different perspective. In this conversation, he talks about the work he does as an osteopath, allowing each individual body to find connection again and create place and space for self-healing. We discuss how people's view of the body is narrowing despite the volume of information out there, and how that might be affecting how they think about their own bodies. We touch on pain and chronic pain cycles, and Gareth talks about the powerful concept of framing pain as protection. He shares what inspired him to work with the body in this field, including his mum's experience with back pain in his own childhood. And we talk about yoga. His take on yoga and what it's doing for us, how and why yoga is such an inclusive practice, and why it's important for yoga teachers to have an understanding of the workings of the body. He says, it's a moving miracle, and we're living and breathing and feeling the anatomy. When we finish this conversation, we're definitely just hitting the pause button. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, Gareth, thank you very much for joining me on a chai session. I have got my cuppa ready.
I have a glass of empty glass here. Let me just get some water. Small amounts.
Got to be prepared for these chats, Gareth.
Here we go. Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers. So before we get started with our chat, which I'm really looking forward to because every time you come down here to Glasgow, I love geeking out. We always get a bit distracted, and I always
a proper 15-minute blather, isn't there?
Yeah. Yeah. The thing is, it always makes me thinking, and I always learn something, even from as we're walking out the door chats.
Yeah.
But just for anyone who hasn't met you yet, Gareth is an osteopath and has been a practicing osteopath, working in his own clinic and clinics around Scotland for over 15 years now. And he also comes along to the CYS yoga teacher training and does a number of sessions on anatomy and physiology. Really delighted to have him do that, and I'm going to pick up on that again towards the end of our conversation. I think we'll chat more specifically about yoga and yoga teachers, but you've been doing that for, I counted, more than 10 years now.
Wow.
Can't believe it.
That's getting, that doesn't feel like it. Yeah.
No, it really doesn't. And clearly neither of us have changed a bit in that time.
No, the material has definitely progressed, and every year you get that extra twist. You're always trying to refine and watch and see how people are receiving it, and try and kind of tune in that regard. But it's they've actually got more fun as they've gone on. I think as the stress levels have come down off the first few, and you get to grips with the audience and the differences even between the Perth audience and the Glasgow side. You know, there's quite a different sweep of people. But trying to deliver the material to make sure that everyone connects is the main thing, you know.
Yeah, and it's a huge challenge every year. The topic, vast and complex, and we're going to talk about this as well. I think constantly changing, you know, opinion and thought, and the science and what we're able to prove and disprove is constantly changing. But before we get into all of that, I thought it would be helpful to ask you, how do you describe the work that you do? What, you know, What is it that you say about what you do?
That's a great question. We were asked to define osteopathy and what osteopathy was to us way back when we were finishing college, when we've been immersed in it for 5 years, and the range of answers that came from that absolutely it amused me to end, because you had a class of 20 odd people and everyone had a very definitive angle on exactly what they thought it was. Um, it's been described along the way as many things, from almost like a kind of manual hypnotism on one side, which I think is doing a bit of a disservice. We just use hands-on therapy to allow the body to find a space where it can create its own self-healing. I think is ultimately the drive with osteopathy. And in doing that, you have to engage with the person as a whole. I think that's critical. And so the very first step when I think about what osteopathy is, I think it's about that connection with another person, and in a very holistic way, trying to understand their place and space, before you start addressing the physicality of the injury or the strain or whatever it is that they're coming in with. So um, it's a brilliant but sometimes tiring profession in that regard, because if you choose to connect in that way, then you're putting a lot of yourself into the work, and on an individual by individual basis, day in day out, it's pretty involved. Um, but that's the reward. It's enormously rewarding as a career. It's quite brilliant, and you get to share that space with people to try and help move them forward and move them out of a pickle. So
Yeah,
I could summarize it that way, or I could summarize it as it's a manual therapy which occasionally moves joints and limbs around to try and get you moving better, and that's doing it a bit of a disservice.
yeah, and in reality, it's probably a bit of both,
It's a bit of both.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, the physicality of it is the bit that people see and is maybe a little bit easier to understand and comprehend and grasp onto.
Yes.
But
Exactly.
that taking a step back and looking at the much bigger picture and the context of that physical stuff
Yeah.
is at
Yeah.
least as important.
I think that's an important point to stress. Is I'm not asking them to do that as a client or as a patient when they come in, but I inherently do that from the second they walk in the door. I'm watching almost kind of body language and behavior, whether it's a pain pattern that's dictating how they're moving, or maybe a mood dictating how they're moving. You're using every sensor you have available to try and work out how you're going to get a successful treatment for them out of that very short space of time. And you're meeting somebody off the street often, if it's first encounter, first patient encounter, then you have to try and run through an awful lot of things to get a result for them at the end of quite a short space of time, and you're essentially a complete stranger to them. So yeah.
So I'm interested in what inspired you to go into this field. What inspired you to work with the body, and then to take all of that knowledge and experience and help people with their bodies?
Yeah. If I think back to early doors, and a lot of these things, of course, come on reflecting during years and years of practice. Sometimes you don't realize the triggers that you've had as a kid, or maybe as other times in your life. But two things really stand out when I think back. One was that my mum went through quite a horrific episode of back pain when we were young kids, and had a sort of aluminium brace. I can only describe as it was almost like a kind of cartoony sort of fishbone arrangement, with
Wow.
sort of padding on one side and then padding on the other side, and basically she kind of clamped herself into this to be able to move around. And I was probably too young to physically remember her in that, but we certainly found it in later years, and my brother used it as a toy, because it was this cage, and it was a thing that you kind of dressed up, and if you were running, it was like your armor, or it was it became this amazing. What is that?
Right.
Um, and the other thing that really stood out, again, going back quite far, was an old Ladybird book of science, and there was a Da Vinci anatomical drawing in the front of that, and I was just about probably 7 when I got that. And I think looking back and
Okay.
seeing our kids and other people's kids, 7 is an age of reason, when kids sort of lift out of themselves and move into the world a bit more. The bigger concepts start to pour in, and that had a real impact. I poured over that drawing for years, and a kind of fascination with anatomy from that. The healing side, I didn't really connect with until a friend had recommended many years later after when I was working as a biochemist. That was my first degree. A friend who was a medic. His sister was an osteopath, and he put me on to the idea that this profession existed, that it was a sort of a space you could use physicality and your brain space to kind of work out problems. And he had obviously clocked that it might be quite a good thing for me that I might take an interest in it. And I went down to the open day for the college about 10 years after that. Long time, like different things, life happened, wasn't on the
Okay.
cards, and then suddenly it was. And on the open day, it was like a flash of light, just a light bulb went on. I thought, I want to do this. I didn't even care I just wanted to find out what it was, but I was so hooked from that first open day. It was quite incredible. Really registered. I thought, right, I want to be in this journey. So that was it. It's weird. It's like primers, and then bump, I kind of hit.
Yeah, you just find yourself where you
That's
need
it.
to
You're meant
be.
to be, maybe.
Yeah.
I feel lucky that it found me, or I found it, or timing, everything. It's lots of many things.
Yeah. And over the course of all these years that you've been working with bodies, what would you say um, is the biggest misconception people have, or biggest misunderstanding people have about themselves and their bodies?
Ooh, that's a huge question. Right, it's a
Just a
great
light,
question.
just a
Yeah,
light chat for a Saturday morning.
I like chat for a Saturday
That's, you know,
morning.
because yeah,
I
because one of
suppose,
the
I
things,
suppose yeah, I suppose that
yeah, I'm just
the power of the amount of information that we have at our fingertips through any device, unfortunately forms a really strong narrative, and depending on your demographic, your age, your likelihood to be reading certain sites, I think that informs an awful lot, and maybe much less so than where we were 30, 40, 50 years ago, when your context was, what was your family doing? What was your brother, sister doing? What did your mum do? What was your granny still doing, if she was doing anything? But we've sort of become more reductionist in some ways, and relying on these very quite a strong narrative, I think, coming from a digital platform. So the idea that a body has to be a certain shape is the obvious one, a certain size, a certain look, a very
yeah,
superficial sort of cosmetic thing. Um, I think is a sort of, hopefully will be a narrative that will pass, and we'll realize that this sort of tiny miracle that we're walking around in every day of our lives. You have an amazingly complex body that's riddled with sensors that gives you an enormous amount of information beyond what we really use it for. And so I think finding the time and space to sort of start to explore that is maybe where people start to understand their bodies better. So I think people maybe, and to get back to what you were saying, I think people maybe don't appreciate what their body can actually do. I think they often restrict themselves through either a headspace, or through well, my body isn't built for that, and actually we're built for quite amazing things. Look at how we've sustained ourselves with the planet, for whatever number of years mankind's been the dominant force here. It's because we're built for survival, adaptation, and continual sort of contextual change. We really thrive on that. So yeah.
yeah. It's definitely part of a kind of bigger narrative, isn't it? So, like you're saying, there's the access to information that we have now is completely unprecedented, and
Yeah.
of course, we're all familiar with consulting with Doctor Google
Mm.
whenever anything goes on. But also, I guess it's part of a bigger picture in that, you know, I'm going to say medically, the body has been kind of portrayed as more machine-like.
Yes. Aye, the
And
plumbing, the tubing, the pumps,
yeah,
yes, yeah. I think
yeah,
I think
and
in base old surgical terms, certainly that surgery is still a pretty, no offense to the surgeons out there, but it's still a pretty nuts and bolts mechano type approach to kind of, fixing and adhering and screwing bits in, and hammering bits of metal on to make things work. And the body can adapt around that really very, very well. So yeah, you're right. There's what. I suppose that a lot of we're maybe going to kind of come on to sort of pain and pain science as a sort of a step into this, but we'll
Yeah.
come to that when we
Have you
come to it. But
seen my
just
question?
just to sort of step back from that a wee bit, I think
Yeah.
even sort of if we were to strip down and we take a very very basic view, a physical view of a body, down to factors such as a skeleton, a muscular system overlaying that, a soft tissue sort of organ systems within that, all interdependent, and a skin-like covering, and then add some blood vessels and nerves. We've got the basis of sort of what we are. Even if we add another material to that, something called fascia, and fascia is this continuous, amazing, adaptive, soft, fluid, dynamic, and at times quite hard, um, fibrous framework that runs from head to toe, skin to bone. It's a 3D continuous mesh that runs all the way through the system. That material houses pretty much every single thing that I've mentioned in that previous list. It constrains it, it contains it, it supports it, and so even just exploring that as a facet of what we are. And most people, you say to them fascia, they don't know what the hell you're talking about. They wouldn't know where to start.
Mm.
It's an amazingly kind of complex physical sort of narrative in the body. But it's actually, as a practitioner, 15 years in, it's probably where I spend most of my time is just trying to kind of read how the fascia is containing and dictating what everything else is doing. Largely in a very physical sense. Before you start getting into sort of working with
Yeah.
where people's
Because
heads
that's
might
the
be.
thing that, yeah, the kind of the nuts and bolts view is helpful and has its place as a building block of understanding, doesn't it? But
Yeah,
then, as you
yeah.
said, the body, we're actually walking, talking miracles, and so there's so much
Immensely,
more
immensely
going on.
complex. Aye. So you learn a lot of this when we all have our own reference points, and we have. It's where a gangly teenager is knocking things over all the time. Suddenly this body that was once this size has sort of gone to that size. All your registers are off. Your hand is further away than you thought. You're constantly
Yeah,
kind of dealing with this expanding sort of context. And so by the time we get to adulthood, I think we sort of pretty much formed where we are, how we move. Interestingly, contextually, I think if you spend a lot of time with family, how they move. I see it through
yes,
mums and daughters. I see it through sons and dads and granddads. You sometimes see, generations of the same back coming through, or the same way of holding, or even if the granddad had a limp in the hip, maybe the dad sort of slightly mimics that when he goes home, and then suddenly the son's doing it. And it's quite a beautiful thing. It's just these little narratives, or is this the way we do it? Then you sort of
yeah.
always look the same.
It's
Um,
incredible, isn't it? Because you can.
yeah.
It's that whole unique gait thing. You can tell
Mm,
somebody from far away because they have a unique gait. But
yeah.
then, like you say, if you see family members
Mm,
walking together, there's definitely like the
yeah.
shape, the the movement
Movement pattern.
patterns. There's
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
um,
I think going back to what you're saying about recognizing the shape and form and those very basics goes way back to before, when we were sort of early formation man. You had to know friend from foe. And you had to know, is that a stranger? Is it a dangerous person? Is it an injured person? Are they moving with intent to do damage? Is it forceful and angry, or is it sort of friendly and sort of subservient? So we sort of have these deep programmed movements, and then of course
yes,
your internal emotional thing will dictate how you release that pattern. So just as a complete aside, and this is something that I heard
yeah,
the other day, and I thought it was quite interesting, but you know emotional trauma stored in the body will be held in a physical form. So it manifests physically very often. And so when you're dealing with body work, you even have to be aware of things like that. This shoulder that maybe hasn't moved in 20 years, there's a reason it's been packaged up tight and held, but there might be another narrative going on there that somebody had either suppressed or forgotten about, or it comes out to play when you start to kind of make things work. So, they're all things that you should be aware of as a practitioner, and given time and
yeah.
space to allow that to unfold is a key thing for me.
Have you seen changes in how you think people are relating to their body over the time? I'm kind of thinking about, as a yoga teacher,
I think like there's always been a bit of this, but I think I see more and more that people navigate the world and operate in the world now basically from the neck up. And
Yeah,
it's so you know we're a lot in our heads,
yeah,
digital devices, how even our existence and culture and society is talked about, and how we exist in that. And when I see people in yoga class, quite often the messages don't seem to be
yeah,
getting through to the limbs. They don't seem to have much of a
yeah.
concept or a connection
Mm.
of this big bit that operates underneath the neck.
Yes, it's that's a truism. I think, we've become very sort of, head, neck, upper body, and as long as your hand can get to whatever it is, that's either putting something into the mouth, or lifting a phone up to a screen up to a face. And kids, unfortunately, are sort of, they're kind of suffering the same thing. There's a whole generation that have grown up not out, kicking around, climbing. And I don't mean to over romanticize my childhood, which was quite a free and easy, off playing in the woods. Really, looking back, quite a gifted space. We're gifted a great deal of freedom, to sit and work, and to go out and play, and just enjoy and be and learn. But outside a lot. Um,
Yes.
and kids don't have that, and that's partly sort of parent protection of kids, because, as you say, the information slew is, it's not safe out there. It's not as safe as it was. Things are different now. It's a medicine world. Blah blah blah.
Mm.
To get back to sort of a specific yoga context, that's interesting, because I think you will find people that are maybe getting into yoga from a digital perspective, and that can be quite a kind of strong, and what ultimately should be quite empowering, and that you get all that information at your fingertips, can often become quite a dictatorial sort of narrative. If you're not doing yoga like this, you're not really doing yoga. If you're not doing that extreme version of this, you're not really doing yoga. If your hips aren't open to here, that's not yoga. And so, to my, and you can correct me on this, but my base understanding of yoga is, it's a meditation on movement, with the breath as a fundamental driver, at its very core. And if you take yoga back to those very simple principles, what are you doing? You're giving the body something, a chance to do something that it should do naturally, and which gives us a healthier body all over naturally, if we allow it to move. Uh, if we encourage the breathing pattern, which again is this, with this upper fixed sort of, restriction, with everything being up and in at the front, we get that to open up. We get people to register with their mechanics, and with the mechanics of the breathing, and then we give them headspace to sit and read what the body's doing. When you give it those two very basic things, it's such a powerful discipline. I mean, it's quite a beautiful discipline in so many ways, but it brings that, and it's age old. It hasn't really changed, despite all the technological advances, and the
Mm.
this and the that. So
Yeah,
the danger
at its
is when,
core.
yeah.
Mm.
So the danger is when you get into these very kind of, strong narratives of, here's what yoga is. It's often a sort of later interpretation of somebody who may be very passionate, but also can maybe have a positive reinforced bias, because that's the yoga they like best. That's the yoga that they enjoy best. That's the kind of club of people that they enjoy being around best. That's not entire yoga. Yoga should be open, and I think it's always had that. That it's at its core is, it's a very accepting practice on all levels. So welcome the really stiff people. Welcome the stiff people that don't think they can move, or don't believe that they can actually, that yoga has to be about bendiness, for example, which is a complete, mistruth. It's
Yeah,
it's
there's
connecting with practice.
a beautiful description, Gareth, better than I could probably have done
Oh, there
myself.
we go.
Um, and I think as well, to come back to the kind of the body for a second, that kind of part of what I think I don't even know if we're trying to do it with yoga, but certainly one of the benefits of yoga is I feel like it's almost losing the communication network within the body to kind of reconnect the
Hmm.
body and the brain
Absolutely.
again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because quite often, if I ask someone what it is, if we're doing a certain posture or a certain technique, what are they feeling, or where are they feeling it? There's often a kind of, oh, no, I'm not very sure where should I be feeling it. And it's like, well, no, you feel what you feel. You feel it where you feel it. It's not for me to take that.
My thoughts.
So it's almost like a flossing of that communication network. And I know it's vast and we don't understand how it works really, but
yeah, we kind of do. We do in a lot of ways, but I think stepping back from all that, and there's a, I suppose a sort of a split there with what you're providing in the space that you can provide your yoga in, which is a great space and a very healthy approach in my view. I mean, I love your approach to it, but I think in doing that and offering somebody a space, you almost have to kind of leave it as a bit of a gift and say, "We'll take that away and have a think about it." It might be a week later they go, "Oh yeah," or it might be 5 years later or 10 years later they go, "Ah, that's what she was on about." I've had those experiences in practice where I've literally had a 10-year message from a very good friend of mine, a tutor, who, through almost saying nothing but kind of cocking her head when I asked her a question, and I thought, oh, the answer's in there, but you're not going to tell me. About 10 years later, it came to me during a patient one day. I went, that's what she was on about. It can arrive from outer space. You know what I mean? So it's in a world where we're used to sort of delivery and immediate what's the word I'm looking for? Immediate gratification from here's where you're missing the bit. Here's the bit. Now do you feel the bit working? It just doesn't always connect like that. We're just it's unfortunately a journey, and like anything that's worth anything, you spend time and effort, and you learn through trying to get it and getting it wrong. You learn through pushing things too hard and going, well, that wasn't the answer either. And it'll be some point you're sitting in the middle of something, a Sunday afternoon, looking out the window in the middle of a posture, and you go, there we go. That's what it's all about. It'll come to you.
That's it.
Yeah, and that's the beauty. I think you have to kind of wait it out. But I do believe in applying yourself to really get anything of worth. And in a world where we can pick up a phone and press a button and get a JCB delivered to the front garden, it's absurd. It's absurd. We're there. We need to sort of remind ourselves that it isn't. Sometimes stepping back, less is more, and you kind of have to earn it a wee bit. I feel that might sound quite old school and quite hard, but I think you have to earn it a bit. So if it is challenging, it's good. The challenging patients are the ones that I learn so much more from than the patients that float in, float out. You do a treatment, they get better, they're happy, you're happy. I'm not saying that isn't rewarding, but it's the ones you just go, why am I not getting this? Why? I'm really trying. It's not working.
Yes.
And you have to dig deep. You have to go somewhere else. You have to just open up a part of your practice that you didn't know existed, or develop a thing that you didn't, or just step back and say, why is this so challenging? And it's that they're little moments of brilliance. You just go, and you might get it and you might not, but they're the worthy ones.
Exactly. And definitely have very similar experience as a yoga teacher. Like I say, it's delightful when someone comes in and does all the stuff.
Yeah.
But way more interesting for me when they can't. And there's no, like, we need to work together to figure out why that is and what might be going on there.
And it's a powerful thing that you can sort of hold that space to let that happen. It's where, as a normal, practical functioning human being, you don't get reactive to that and go, just do it. Why aren't you doing it?
Just do it. Yeah. and Let me just do that for you.
I love the phrase "holding the space." I think that's a great, it's a sort of therapeutic term, but I think just holding the space to allow somebody to explore it, and that doesn't mean that you've held it for 5 minutes, therefore they should have got it within 5 minutes. It's just you have to be a bit kind of okay. So we're here now, and where are you? I didn't no further forward. It might be another 2, 3, 4 sessions of that before things start to click, but given it time, I think that's where the hard work comes in, because for you that's harder work, arguably.
And it's not,
so it's getting the connection.
And it's not us stepping in and doing anything or fixing anything. It's
exactly
It's
Exactly.
completely different, isn't it?
You can guide and you can inform and you can suggest and you can lay it at their feet a wee bit, and then and you have to sort of let that body do with the information what it's going to do. And the power of yoga is that it seems to embrace all those differentials, all those, all the differences in what people bring to the practice, but can still embrace them into a cohesive, forward moving. Here's how we're all going to do it today, and everyone can feel included. And it's always been an inclusive practice in my eyes. There's very few people that
Definitely.
you sit at the back because you're not twisting so well. You're making us all look bad. You've been coming 20 years.
Yeah, that's just if you come to my class, Gareth. I'd quite like. I know we're constrained for time here,
there
but
might
I'd
be a
quite
part two
like
to
to.
this, I think.
Yeah, so I wonder if we could maybe just touch on pain. We mentioned it earlier on, and I know we've spoken about it a few times now. And what I find particularly intriguing about some of the information and the science that's coming out about this now is that often the site of pain isn't where we might find the source of the pain.
Yes.
And also, a lot of the studies that are coming out now are showing that pain is not necessarily associated with tissue damage.
That's the most important thing. I was going to say, if you hadn't said that, that was the most important thing I was going to say. Aye.
Yeah, so and I'm intrigued with that one from both counts. So you can have pain with no tissue damage, but you can also have tissue damage with no pain.
Yes.
Blows my mind.
Explain. Is this the explain it moment?
Discuss.
Right. Pain.
Just maybe, like I say, just touching on it, get some thoughts, because
So
it is a big topic.
the first thing I would say, and the crowd that probably have instructed me most on sort of pain and pain science recently, it's an Australian crowd called the Neuro Orthopedic Institute, NOI. And if you look up NOI, they do a very good introductory book called Explain Pain. And it's a patient manual that you give out as a therapist to help somebody explain chronic pain cycles. And that's where they really specialize. Why is somebody so sore all the time when they don't, why is the body not just letting that pain drop,
Yes.
So the first thing that they really teach is that pain is protection. And protection is very much an internal headspace thing. Why aren't you letting that go? If you fell over and hurt your ankle when you were 4, why at the age of 44 are you still saying that's my bad ankle? And the sort of the aftershock of the event can leave quite a strong imprint at times where a body just can't physically move forward, and it adapts quite heavily around that. Find the hip will be shifting on that side, the lower back will be tighter on that side. There might be a scoliosis develops off it, that's this kind of S curve through the back. One shoulder might be sitting higher because of a previous injury a very, very long time ago that essentially had healed but just was still being protected. So this comes to your sort of localized site or your point of pain and where it's sort of adapted to. I would sort of flip that on its head and say that often if there's been a painful site, the narrative might be somewhere entirely else in the body as a final sort of holding stage, if you know what I mean. So do you understand what I mean by that? So you've protected so much from the ankle that the leg's now adapted, the hip's adapted, the mid back's adapted, and actually it's nestling up here in your stiff shoulder, which is now the kind of problem area as such. It's where the kind of holding is. In turn, to get back to this pain and protection idea, I think that's quite a powerful idea, and this is sometimes I think where disciplines, like for example, where osteopathy and physio maybe might split ever so slightly. And I've got to be careful of this because I don't know enough about the kind of physio narrative. I know that there's sort of different theories within the sort of current physio thinking that take us through this. But when we were training, we were encouraged never to push through pain. I'm not suggesting that other practitioners do, but pain was always sort of seen as it's a barrier for the patient. So try and understand the context of that barrier instead of just pushing through it and making it move, make it move better. when you come to what physios are taught to do, things like post-operative movement, where they're getting tissues in a really pragmatic, sensible, it's a good thing to get post-operative tissues moving quite quickly, because the healing process will then work with that new kind of line of movement and give you a more functional repair, essentially. You are pushing through pain occasionally. So where I'm going with this is, I wouldn't want you to get to the point where you thought pain is simply protective and it's not an indicator of damage, and therefore you just push solidly through that to make things happen. I would listen to it and try and understand what pain is for you as a person, or as a yoga practitioner, or just as a person, and wait for what might kind of bubble up if you kind of sit with that space for a little while.
So I really liked what you were saying there about framing up pain as protection, because I think for people who are struggling with pain, that's actually quite a helpful and possibly even an empowering way to think about it, that it's not an inevitability and there's space there for change.
Yeah, change. The idea, the narrative that the change is on hand is I think a key thing. It's the nature of us as a species. We develop, the body changes every day. The body's changing. I think something like somebody told me, in fact, told me something they'd heard this morning. It was another yoga teacher, that I think it takes just over a year for the body to have completely replaced every single cell in its entirety. And so, the nature of life is change. That's where we are. When you come to the specifics of yoga, I think getting people to connect with an area that might be a challenge for them, and I think that protective response of pain, that idea that the pain isn't necessarily damaged. Pain can be damaged, but pain is more often than not is a protective response. And getting to the point where they can interface with that and make changes around that. It's one of the most powerful things you can do in practice, because, as you say, when you move on with that, you have a situation where the patient is empowered, and empowered with very simple tools, movement, meditation, breath, and you can do an awful lot with that. It's a whole, it's obviously quite a complex area when you get down to it. How and why the pain starts, what the pain significance is for the patient.
Yeah, that's maybe another chat for another day.
What the patient allows, what the pain allows the patient to do, or actually prevents them from doing, which they might find quite handy. So it's all that. So yeah.
That's maybe Gareth McGee, The Return.
Okay, if there's going to be if there's demand, we'll see.
Yeah.
The incoherent Irishman returns.
Yeah. Oh, I think with that summing up, Gareth, I think that's a really nice place to hit pause on this conversation. And I really appreciate you joining me. But just before finish up, I wondered what your thoughts are on people like me, like us, who are doing something like teaching yoga, who are asking people to move their bodies and be in their bodies. Like, maybe something about how important you think it is that we have an understanding of anatomy, physiology, how the body works, bearing in mind that we're not medical practitioners. Our scope is, well, for me, my scope is a yoga teacher. So just wondered what your thoughts were around that.
Yeah, it's obviously, as you say, it's not that you have to have a working, functional, close relationship with knowing your anatomy inside out. But I think in understanding anything at all, and you can decide as an individual practitioner how much you want to take on, but having any connection at all with what the body's actually doing under the skin, what a joint might move to, how a muscle might behave, how fascia behaves, what a nerve stretch might feel like. I think it helps you as a practitioner connect with yourself, and if you couldn't connect with yourself, then surely you can that allows you to sort of open yourself to try and at least to kind of start this narrative with others and connecting with themselves. Um, I think yoga attracts people that have found the benefits of yoga, and yoga teachers that set up the spaces have found enormous singular benefits from that. So to bring the anatomy into that, to me, is a critical step. I think it's where you really start to go deep in it, in a not just bring your attention to the knee kind of way, which is quite a beautiful thing, but actually if you can bring your attention to the knee and know that it's a hinge joint that has a wee bit of play in it, that it has a sort of fluid capsule around it, that it has these massive muscles working around it, that it really probably shouldn't be pushed much further than that position that you're in, for various reasons, and just living and breathing and feeling the anatomy, I think it's certainly something I enjoy on a daily basis, in practice. I live and I really do thrive in knowing I have to know the anatomy for my job, but it's I just find it fascinating, the way that the way the body's put together. It's a moving miracle. It really is. So if you can start to dip into that, whatever level of interest you have with that, and whatever distance you want to take that, that's another lifelong learning journey. And the beauty is that we have the tools inside us, where every one of us has a body that we can explore and meditate on and move and feel and register. So yeah.
Gareth, thank you so much
Alright.
for that. Here's to
Very
many more cuppas and to geeking out.
Yeah, I'm almost out of water of a dribble. So
Yeah, thank you
all right,
very
Judy,
much.
thank you very much. No, I really appreciate it, and thanks for giving me the time and space to chat. It's as always, I love, and you said this at the start. I love the fact that our chats go far and wide very quickly, and a lot of it is just exploratory as well. So always up for dialogue and always up for challenge, I think, and exchange, because that's where we really start to learn.
Yeah,
And start
questions
to
and conversation.
bring
Yeah.
narratives in there, and accept that there's fresh streams and challenges to be had. It's really healthy, we take it forward.
Absolutely, and challenge our own thinking, our own bias, our own
Yeah.
opinion.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Judy. All the best. Okay.
Our next 200-hour yoga teacher training programme is live and in person here at Merchant City Yoga. The course starts this September and runs for one weekend a month for 12 months. If you're interested in finding out more, the syllabus and course dates are on the website, and I'm inviting potential applicants to come along to one of our teacher training weekends to meet up for an informal chat. We also have sister CYS courses running in Perth and Surrey, and you'll find all the dates and details for them at cysyogateachertraining.com. These conversations are unedited, but I'd like to shout out Steph Northcote for smoothing out the wrinkles. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends. You can even follow, rate and review to help others find us too. Until next time, thank you so much for listening.